Okay.
So thank you for coming to the News-Miner studio today.
Well, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And this is, first question is just your opportunity for voters who haven't had a chance to read your materials, go to any of the forums. What would you want voters to know about you that qualifies you to be the mayor, and why do you want to be mayor of Fairbanks?
Well, what qualifies me is I'm a small business owner. I've been very successful. I was able to totally renovate the old Caribou Loan pawn shop down on 2nd Avenue, which houses the River City Cafe now. And so I've got hands-on management in the business, and I brought that building up. I mean, it was a dormant building. I went in and totally remodeled it. It was a huge endeavor. And then I also was on the council for 6 years, and during that time on council, I brought forth many ordinances. A lot of them had to do with the fiscal health of the city. Most of them did. And it was like when we lost all our money because we had two competing ballot measures, and all of a sudden the city found itself with no money. I put together the Citizen Review Committee to bring the citizens into the conversation of whether our departments were running efficiently or not. And that's a very important component. That's where we can do wage surveys before we go into negotiations with the labor unions. And it gives the people the opportunity to understand not only the money of the city, but also understand what our police and fire do and what kind of rules they all live under. And it was a huge educational thing, and that is supposed to happen every 7 years. And so after that, I'm very well involved in the community. I volunteer a lot in this community, always have. And so I know the community intimately at all levels. And I just love where I live, and I would like nothing more than to be mayor. I love the work, I've got to tell you. I like being the person between the government and the citizen. It gives me such an opportunity to help out when we can. It also helps me learn how we're working well and how we're not at the government level. So I just really love it. It's so diverse. I learn so much from the people, from the citizens. I learn so much from them about how we're doing in government, and it's just a joy. Just a joy.
Sounds good. Well, voters who know you and know your name likely associate you with another community leader. You've worked on the staff of Representative Tammy Wilson. Someone who wants to know you as an individual and as a candidate, are there any, just because you work for someone doesn't mean you necessarily line up with them on everything?
No.
Are there any main policy differences between you and Ms. Wilson that you'd want to know
Well,
about?
I think this is kind of an interesting question, because I know the opposition has tried to paint me as, a Tammy Wilson. And the reality is Tammy is her own person, I am my own person, I have my own record in the city, and we are different. Now, when I'm a staffer, the people elected Miss Wilson, and that means I work for her. And so my opinion doesn't have a place there. My job is to respect the people's vote and to work for Miss Wilson. I tell you, the one thing that we have in common is we do our homework. We definitely go out there and we research. We definitely respond to the citizens immediately and promptly, and I think that's most important. I think that I always say customer service aspect is most important to me, because that is who we work for, all of us. And so in those two respects, we are the same.
I'm going to want to press this one a little bit, because you said you wanted to resist. You don't like that, someone in your opposition would say, oh, well, I'm not a Tammy Wilson clone. Is there anything specifically, though, that, and I know it's hard because it's a former employer, but you didn't really support something that she did in the legislature that you would specifically want voters to know about? And no, the financial answer, I'm just curious.
Nothing in particular. It's just, it's one of these, people want to take and, do a broad brush, and you can't, it just doesn't wash that way. I mean, you got to look at the city and what I've done here and how well, I've been able to move. I think there were 19 ordinances I wrote in 6 years, and certainly a few of them did not make it, did not pass, but vast majority passed, and by building consensus. And I've been in this community for a long time. So it's just, those are the difference. And I can't really comment on, what we did in Tammy's office per se, because I wasn't, that was not my job to develop my own opinion. My job was to do as directed.
Sounds good. Let's talk about labor unions. You've questioned your opponent's willingness to grant a labor union arbitration award. He says that not honoring such an award would be bad for goodwill of negotiations. What, as a mayor, would you want to do to retain the goodwill of city employees?
Well, number one is to negotiate the table fairly and equitably, and for the people to understand, when you're negotiating, I represent the people of Fairbanks. They have X amount of dollars in the game. The only way those dollars change is by an increase in taxes. We have a community that's strapped right now. We've got heating costs, electric costs that are outrageous. So when we negotiate a contract, we have to look at our revenues and what we're paying out. And that has to fit in with those union contracts. Now, is it not good faith? Well, let's go this way. I would never, ever want to be in a position to do non-funding. I would never want that. But when it goes to an arbitrator and they send back this award on a contract and it's more that we're going to pay out than we have identified sources of revenue, not savings, not the capital fund. Because once you start robbing from capital fund and savings, you're negatively going to impact our ability to do maintenance in this community. All of that's just as important. However, if he comes back with an award, or she comes back with an award that we can't fund on revenues, ongoing revenues, then that's a non-funding situation. And it has been upheld. Firefighters sued the city twice, and it has been upheld. And let me say it again, it's an ugly tool. It's the only tool they've given us. And I find that unfortunate. But the reality is, I cannot take an arbitrator's award and go back to the people and say, they say you have to do it, pay more in taxes. I think the people of the community have that opportunity to say, this is how much we're willing to spend on government. Do the best you can with it. And again, our police and fire are not paid the worst, and they're not paid the most. They're right in the pack. That's all I can do is identify the sources and work honestly at the table. But I have to protect the people's interests and the health of the city.
Sure. Let me ask you about another ugly side of the city, chronic inebriates. Do you think there's something else the city government should be doing with respect to chronic inebriates?
No, I think what we've done now, and I think this is a very interesting component here, that is a community effort, and it has been going on for many years. And the hospital's in on it, Doyon, several other people that support this. And the city, through my ordinance that I wrote, that I crafted, and we donate to CSP $50,000, and we require a match of $140,000 to the program. And the reason why we did that was so that the other stakeholders in this issue would stay at the table. I mean, you've got to have mental health, you've got to have, the physical health, you have to have all these other partners. If you're working towards a solution, everyone needs to be in that. It's not a one-person fix. And so I do support our contribution, and I think that we need to make sure that everybody stays at the table to do the best we can to serve those citizens that are having problems like that. Bottom line.
Sounds good. I'd like to ask you about your, one of the other things your opponent has brought up in this election is this idea of creating a diversity council to help give minority groups a voice in the city. Mm-hmm. You've been a past city council member. Do you think that minorities are able to voice their concerns right now, and how could communication be improved? Well,
I think that we have many of our committees have diverse groups, diverse people that are represented, like on our bed tax committee. I think we've always listened to every voice that's come forward, but I can understand that sometimes, there's 100 different languages spoken in our community, which I didn't know, and I've learned this season, which I think is awesome.
Me too.
It's news. I think you always have to be more welcoming to folks who may feel a little inhibited, maybe because their English is not so good, or they're intimidated by the system. My goal would be to break down the system, or not break down the system, would have the system be a welcoming system so people felt more comfortable to come forward. Absolutely. One of the things I'd like to do, because I've been involved in the community with different volunteer groups, I contacted many of those groups and asked to speak to them to find out what their concerns were. And that was one of the concerns, was about how, the different languages, and that we've got different pockets of people. So you can encourage people to mingle. And one thing I will do is go to groups that meet. I know that Mayor Sturl tried to have a neighborhood meeting to get people out to come and air their concerns. Unfortunately, everybody is so busy that didn't work. So I'm going to propose going to their regular community meetings and meet with them and bring whoever we need to from the city if it's a road issue or a police issue. But I think that's the outreach I would like to see. And, having been involved in the community, I know a lot of folks already. I personally have never had a problem moving throughout this entire community. And so I welcome that.
Sounds good. Here's another community issue that's been city, borough, statewide issue.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious if you think the city government should be more involved. The issue of air quality. Should city council, is there anything you'd want to do from the city perspective with respect to air quality?
Well, I think what we need to do with air quality is make sure all the components of that argument are brought forward and that the state is paying attention to them. What's going to happen when we get the pipe laid and we've got the gas going and we have folks that cannot change out. To me, that's the number one priority. And I've already started looking into how do you get everyone to be able to change out. There is HB 35, it's 1% loan through ADA. However, what happens if that gets funded and then statewide, it goes out statewide, and then there's nothing left by the time we get gas here. So I have concerns to make sure that everybody can change out for our health. I know a lot of people think that, I'm not that concerned, or because I had worked with Representative Wilson that it's not true. I have an inhaler ever since 2004. I'm bothered greatly by smoke, and I do believe we need to clean it up. I do believe that natural gas is absolutely a piece of that. So my concern is we get the gas here, and we have people that either can't get the credit, aren't financially able to do it. So I am looking at ways now that we can get everybody to change over for our air quality, because we need to do that.
Well, Ms. Stiver, thank you so much for coming. And as they said at one of the forums, I can't say it any better. Thanks for being willing to put a big target on your back and go out there.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. This is kind of a new thing here with this YouTube, so I do appreciate it also. Thank you.
Sounds good. And I will see you on election night.
Alrighty.